Hello. So this week we talked about a lot of things, and it was a lot to take in and read and watch. But I think it was important to do that because in order to really understand and honestly empathize with a lot that was going on, or a lot that is still going on when it comes to the people that we learned about and the systems that we learned about. So, when it comes to Hungry for a Profit, with the ideological framework regarding migrant workers, with uneven economic development and multinational agribusiness, with the undocumented labor, and it was disrupted. So, how does labor and global hunger impact immigration? And so it did tie into that. I guess you really have to understand the motivation for when people are truly hungry, truly without their needs. Families will do anything, especially moms and dads for their children. And so not only are they hungry for themselves, their children were hungry. And so what's so sad is how you watch with agribusiness, how it seems to be a way to keep a country going and to keep them thriving, when in actuality, they're just working, hours upon hours and, you know, just almost, it's just so difficult. And then for what? Their families are hungry, they can't afford to buy um, the crops that they are growing and harvesting, they can't even afford that food. And so it's supposed to be that those people are getting fed when in actuality, those items are getting shipped off. And so you started to notice, like with the riots, eventually um, people are going to fight back. And so I think with that, with the immigration, you're only going to take it for so long, to where, first of all, it's the unsafe conditions. And so like then when we get into with Wilden is his name, we talk about him, we talk about Enrique, and how their parents had to come. It's really sad to think about the moms having to leave. What mom wants to leave their child? But these kids eventually they just said, you know what, like I want my family back together. I think they got older and it's they just had to they wanted to be reunited. That piece of them was missing. But also it was unsafe. It's not like they were sitting back in their home country thriving. Instead, it was unsafe. And then those conditions were not good. They were hungry. And so they wanted to kind of see, like, hey, could it be better for me? And with Wilden, he goes to school, he's successful. Sadly, he was arrested with possible deportation, and luckily that did not happen. Unfortunately, he misses graduation. So that was really sad to hear about. And I think when we hear these real life things, that's what we need to kind of reframe our ideology. And so when I think of what my ideology was like before, I know that's part of one of the questions, kind of what were my thoughts on it, and did it change the framework that I had? Certainly, because I didn't know, and that's the sad part about a lot of this is people are just simply ignorant to these things. And I did share some of that information with my father, who comes from a different generation, and he's like, wow, I didn't realize some of this either. And, part of that is then he did kind of say, well, I don't know what can we do about it? And it's like, that's something that I feel a little helpless about. And you don't want to turn your back on it though. I mean, I think, that's why we can vote the way we do, to try to try to pick politicians that might help and do something about it. And then just, as an educator especially, I do have a role in this. And so basically, it talks about the hegemony. I hope I'm saying this right. And that one was one I had to kind of read about a little more. But it says it refers to the control of the ideology of a society. The dominant group maintains power by imposing ideology on everyone. And this is something that we've been reading about, especially when we have those takeovers. And there's a lot of gang violence in some of these impoverished countries, and these ideologies are pushed on people. But the immigrants coming over, they kind of have to conform to our ideologies as well. The ideology refers to the stories, myth, explanations, definitions, and rationalizations that are used to justify inequality between the dominant and the minoritized group. The key element is that it enables domination to occur with the consent of the minoritized group rather than by force. And so that's really sad when you think about that. That consent, the people believe that they deserve these unequal positions. The positions are fair and neutral. No force is necessary. And I kind of felt that way, when those people were coming in the video, Hungry for Profit. They came in, they just took their land. You see these people working. At first, they're like, hey, that's my land, don't take it from me. But they couldn't do anything about it. So it looks as if like, hey, I'm here working. I'm just accepting my position. This is what I do. I have to do this. But then you do see people fighting back. And so it's just, and then you get into the Panopticon, and this is another one that it's pretty complex. I mean, I feel like we learned a lot about some complex concepts. But it just basically, the prisoners were constantly visible to the central tower while they themselves were blinded. They never knew when they were being watched. The guard could monitor the prisoners without the prisoners knowing when or even if they were being observed. It's like a self-policing. Foucault did not see these relations as fixed and unchangeable, but rather as constantly reproduced and negotiated. We have the ability to challenge power, but first we must see and understand how power works. And he also argued it's a metaphor for the ways in which power is transmitted and normalized through these social institutions, through schools. And I think with us, with the immigration and these children coming in, we have to, it says educators can refuse these surveilling technologies. Sure, they can. I think the big thing is just, we don't want to force our ideologies onto other people. And if you view a school as a prison, we don't want it to be that way. We want people to be able to, number one, we want their cultures celebrated, but we also don't want to teach, this is really, it's hard to say, but we want to make sure that we're teaching the way that we should, and that it's not, the way it used to be where, you only heard the one side of history. You want to be open to all of it. And kids can have a say, even though they're children, they can have a say in their education. And so society should not control people, and we shouldn't use school that way. And so we want to make sure that we are teaching history the way it should be taught. And that also that we are considering that, like for a standardized test, they need to consider the differences not only of ability, but the differences in culture and race. And so, as a teacher, I think we have a big say in it. I know the teacher with Walden, she was just devastated when he was deported. And so I've never had that situation with kids as young as mine, but I will say that we have, I would say per year, I think last year we had at least 20 children come in that were immigrants. So we do have a lot of those children. So I can definitely be their advocate. Luckily, we do have Hispanic Heritage Month, and we bring those families in and let them feel accepted and valued members of our community. And I think we can all learn from everything that we've learned in this module. Thank you very much.